alligator, come here, sister. Papa's in the swing. Hit you hip now, but I can dig the new breathing. He ain't no drag. He's got a brand new bag. But Papa, you're doing the jack. Papa, you're doing the jack. You're doing the twist. Just like this. He's doing the fight every day and every night. The thing like the boomerang. Hey, come on. Hey, hey, come on. Hey, said you uptight, you're out of sight. Come on, see what you know. Come on. I said, shut up.
Welcome back to the Professor Penn podcast. This is David Penn. It's episode number 140, The Population Bomb. Episode number 140, The Population Bomb. We're here in the studio early in the morning, Tanner and I. It's September 2nd, Labor Day. Good morning, Tanner.
Good morning, David, and good afternoon, everybody.
We're going to put this episode up on September 3rd, right?
Correct.
7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Hope everybody's having a good holiday weekend, or you've had a good holiday weekend when you see this. Appreciate all the support. Got this new idea from Tucker. Let's repost. If you like the content, please repost the link in your social media. We need to go viral. We need to build our digital army. Number one. Number two, precinctstrategy.com for everything you need to know about how to get into the game of politics. And what a time to get in right now. It's time for Get Out the Vote. Now, many of my cohorts were out at the Minnesota State Fair this past weekend, interacting with the public, which was great. I was working my neighborhood here in SD45. Guess what? In SD45, we got a special election because our former congressperson, or soon-to-be former, Dean Phillips, decided to run for president, gave up his seat in the Congress, and we have a special off-year congressional election here, federal, where Kelly Morrison, who was the state senator from my district, has elevated herself. She's now running for the federal government, facing off against a Republican named Tad Jude, and that leaves my district, SD45, the Senate seat, vacant. We're having a special election. It's special. We have a special candidate, Kathy Folk, on the Republican side, and she's running, and if she wins, what they call the Democrat trifecta, where they have complete control of the government, will be interrupted. So what I'm doing is I'm working my neighborhood. Yes, I am. Isn't that cool?
You spreading the word about Kathy?
I'm spreading the word about vote R up and down the ticket. You know, this is one of the things, if you're a Republican Party officer, I'm telling you something you already know. There's a lot of, how should we say, disagreement in our party. Disagreement. We're disagreeable. Why are we disagreeable? We're Republicans. We are self-governing. You know, the other side of the football, on that other side, they're not self-governing. They want to be governed. So they all fall in line in what they call lockstep. For example, our presidential candidate on the Democrat side, Vice President Harris, she never went to she didn't go to any primaries. She didn't stand in front of the voters. She didn't do a debate. In fact, a couple months ago, she was the worst vice president in American history. They were actually saying what Biden needs to do is get her off the ticket so he has a chance to beat Trump. Do you remember that by any chance?
I don't. I'm sorry, I don't.
Oh, I do. I'm cursed with the kind of a memory doesn't let go of things, lest I choose to let them go. Now, she's the greatest candidate ever. She's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Wow. You see, everybody agrees. They all agree to agree. Over here on the Republican side, we don't agree to agree. And Dan Schultz said something, and it's going to be worth repeating over and over again. Dan, I love this thing. He said, I can't guarantee that we can save the republic. But I'll guarantee you that if we don't get the American citizens into the Republican Party, no chance to save the republic because then everybody's down with the Democrat liberal order, right? So in our party, we have a lot of different ideas. But now's not the time for arguing. It's just before the election. Now it's vote R up and down the ticket. So for those candidates that, for whatever reason, I'm not here to criticize them today, that they don't want to support this candidate or that candidate, all this intra-party bickering. This is not the time for that. I had a meeting yesterday morning, 7:30 meeting, with people in my political orb. You know what I told them? No bickering. We're not bickering between now and November. I'm not going to allow it. I know people have different opinions, and I know that they are passionately engaged with their ideas. And that's great. That's what it is to be an American citizen. But if we can't put that aside inside our party for 2 months and go unite against a common enemy, and what is that common enemy? What is its characteristic? Its characteristic, Tanner, is tyranny. Tyranny. If we can't unite against that, if there's people, we're going to talk about some of these people this week because there's some, they want to paint us a picture that negotiating with tyranny is a reasonable strategy. I don't agree that it is. I don't. I stay with the principle. I'm moving towards the principle. But right now today, I'm not arguing. You're all my friends. We're all together now. We're not going to have any, we're not going to have any pejoratives. We're not going to have any arguing. We're going to get out and get out the vote. That's everybody watching this broadcast. You're going to put this up in your socials. It's time to go to TrumpForce47.com. It's time to quit your complaining, quit the backbiting, quit the backstabbing, quit the passive-aggressive stuff, and actually, which I did every day this weekend, and I'm going to do it again today, walk the neighborhood, talk to the neighbors. I like to make I statements. I do. When I talk to another American citizen, I don't tell them what they're supposed to do. I don't say you do this and you do that. I tell them what I'm doing. I make I statements. It makes for a better conversation, right? When you use the word you, things break down real quick. When I use the word you, I'm actually ready to get in a fight. If you hear the word, if we get in an argument, Tanner, and I start saying you, pay attention because I'm no longer trying to communicate. I realize communication has been interrupted. I had to deal with this on the day before was Saturday morning. I was meeting with some political people in my orb, and there was an actual shouting match that broke out. A shouting match. And there was someone with a legitimate beef that they wanted to express this complaint, and the person that received it flipped out and started screaming. It happened to be a woman screaming at the top of her lungs back at this guy. And I thought to myself, you know what I thought to myself?
What'd you think?
I thought, this is a vignette of unreality.
You're
And
gonna
you
have to
want to know why I feel that
you're
way?
gonna have to explain that one for me.
It was a vignette of unreality, and I'm just going to tell you why it was. We are all American citizens, men and women both. I believe in the liberation of women. Women are not property. They're sentient beings. They're not subordinated. They're not. We are fulfilling the aspirations of our founding documents that we are going to form a more perfect union. And we keep growing and experiencing. When men get in an argument with each other, there's a limit what they're going to say to each other. And the reason why is men can become violent. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah.
But no one's going to hit a woman. No one's going to threaten a woman. That has become a bedrock of our culture. That's a bedrock. I am not going to do this. I can't do it. I can't do it philosophically, which, hey, in my generation, that was growth, right? Because I was born in a different era. So I've had to grow through this thing. And my mother was a leader of the women's liberation movement. My father used to proudly wear a T-shirt. This is what a feminist looks like, pointing to himself. I grew up in that kind of environment. So truly have uptaken this. I've been acculturated into a new format. However, if we get into an argument and you start screaming at me, do you believe you're risking a physical? If you get in my face and start barking at me and violating the line of propriety that we share, there is between men, would you agree with me, the possibility of physical violence?
Yeah, 100. Well, a small thing that you can see subconsciously is most time when men talk, they don't face directly at each other when standing. And that's one sign. We all instinctually know, like, yeah, this dude could could scrap right now if he wanted to. So I'm not gonna get in his face. I'm not gonna be confrontational and face to face with him.
There's some limit on the dialogue,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Some limit.
yeah, don't step on my blue suede shoes.
That's exactly. And then you get this situation where women don't fear that and can say and do whatever they want to do. And I've been waiting for this to change for 40 years. I mean, if we're all equal under the law, which I believe we are, we have to recover some republicanism in how we speak with each other. And let's say somebody does go off psychologically. They go off because I do it sometimes. That's an opportunity for healing. So guess what happened? When we left the meeting, it was all hugs and kisses. Why? Because I was there. I had to intervene. And that's what we do when we're in a movement. We know people come from different places. We don't judge against people because, as I always remind people, most of us voted for George Bush if we're our age. So, people have to go through a process of reconciliation, of atonement, and of redemption. And that's why we started out with James Brown, Papa's Got a Brand New Bag. And I said we were going to do that in the last episode. Okay, so here's the deal again. The song, the lyrics of the verse have nothing to do for me with what I'm trying to say. I'm making this up whole cloth because I think the song is really about new dances. It's not a very sophisticated song. You can do the monkey. You can do all kinds of different dances, right? The mashed potato. Papa's got a brand new bag. He's got a new dance routine. Okay, we're going to extrapolate that into the baggage drop. I talk to so many people. I try to respond to them. I took a very long email from one of the listeners this past weekend, and I wrote back a very long I statement. And it was about the struggles with metabolic disease, because we were talking about metabolic disease. And what you don't know about me is I struggled with it uh, for a long time, in the sense that we've talked about this also. Royce and I have talked about it. Black mothers will tend to protect their male children by making them not aggressive, because the price for being an aggressive uh, man could be, death by cop, right? Well, in a very similar ways, exactly the same, but just a little different. Jewish mothers and grandmothers want their sons to be compliant, because look at the history of the uncompliant and the clipped out, which we're going to talk about tonight. So I was raised to be passive and to be intellectual. And in fact, my grandmother used to put sticks of butter in my mouth. No bread, just butter to fatten me up. So by the time I was in seventh grade, I was like 36-inch waist. I was like 180 pounds. And like we talked about, I think we talked about this last time, I saw Soul Train and the rest is history, because I wanted to get with the program of being cool. But my point in this is, I answered this long, uh, correspondence to me about metabolic disease. Someone was sharing their frustration, and I was trying to let them know that I share that same frustration, that I've gone through those same trials and tribulations and continue to go through it right where I'm at. In other words, all of us are in this path to enhance our human well being, which is the cornerstone of republicanism as enshrined in our document, the founding documents, which give us the right to pursue our life, and our liberty and our pursuit of happiness, granted by a creator. So we're all working in this continuum of trying to optimize. And I wrote back a long I statement. I statement. I didn't say you. I said my struggles, what I have to do, what I have done, and what I've tried to do in my own life relative to my own metabolic dysfunction because we're living in a world that disrupts us. What I've tried to do is make it a priority and to, love my own process of getting there. So here I am. I'm still working on it. I still have goals along this line, right? I mean, we're all working on this thing. So it doesn't matter where we're at. It doesn't matter what our accomplishments are. Those are in the past. What are we going to do today? The past is gone. It's a memory. If we're thinking about the future, we're living in a cognitive distortion because it's not here. All we got is the present, our present exercise of free will. So the baggage drop, we'd spend all this, I spend all this time I have in my life figuring out how this happened, how that happened, this happened, that, blaming, releasing blame, and we have all these psychological mechanisms going for therapy, taking drugs, self-medicating, all these things that are all aimed at dealing with feelings of discomfort. Well, my first comment is I become comfortable feeling uncomfortable. So when I have a anxiety attack, which I do, I just accept it. I mean, I'm not going to judge against myself and say that somehow I'm dysfunctional or I need help because I'm having anxiety. I just go, man, this is going to pass. It's a feeling. I just sit with it when I'm sad, when I'm mad. I try to accept my own feelings, take responsibility for them. And when I feel good or optimistic or feel well, I don't pay a lot of attention to that either. I try to use my feelings as the informational system that they really are. Feelings are an informational feedback system to enhance my well being. So I try not to judge against my feelings. That's number one. Number two, I try to be mindful about what I'm doing every day. And I shared this in this correspondence back. I want to be mindful every day about what I'm doing. But this baggage drop, right? This baggage drop where I drop my old bags, and it doesn't matter what the problem is. I'm focused on this problem. I have problems. I get people remind me of my problems. They tell me this, that, thus, and so about me. They make you statements. I say, yes, I agree. But it doesn't matter to me because I don't see problems. I see opportunities. I'm older. I got a lot of issues. They're all making me who I am. I accept them all. I don't judge against myself. I judge not lest I be judged. I try not to make any judgments. I have faith. That's the thing that's really beautiful about these challenges. When all else fails for me, I just default to having faith. I walk by faith and not by sight. So everything for me comes back to this desire to build my faith, that I believe that all things are possible. With prayer, all things are possible. And I'm working constantly in this direction. So the baggage drop for me is, my I statement, when I gave over to working in the American citizens movement, when I gave over to working for the well-being of my fellow citizens as an officer of the party, I became a new person. I dropped my bags. Papa's got a brand new bag. I had a new dance. I never danced like this before in my entire life. I never got up thinking about what am I going to do in my neighborhood today? What doors am I going to knock on? Who am I going to meet? What are they going to ask me? How do I answer them? Another guy sent me some, these questions about uh, communications, worldwide communications, and the shutdown of acts in Brazil. And I mean, my answer stretched over a day because he was forcing me to think about what I was saying. It's a baggage drop. I don't have time to contemplate the things other people perceive as, let's say, metabolic disorder. I don't have time to contemplate it. I'm too busy being engaged in the maintenance of freedom, which is now something that we have to do at this time in this place. From time to time, about every 100 years on a cycle, we get to a fourth turning where things have become so corrupt that if American citizens don't rise up and address the corruption, we lose the republic. I like this one. I'm going to say it. Dan Schultz. You can vote your way into socialism. You just can't vote your way out. Can't get out. Right here we are on the precipice of this thing. And I believe in the American process of self-governance. So I do not see end. I see infinite. But this is kind of a watershed moment. So I'm working my neighborhood. Everybody needs to do that. Where do you need to work? Your neighbors. You have to tell them what you think. You have to make I statements. You have to give over to what you know you have to do. If we don't do it now, when are we what are we waiting for? I mean, if we're not, you voted. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What were you waiting for? Because if you don't do it now, when were you going to do it? Well, you did it. You're a registered voter.
Mhm.
Isn't that great?
It felt it felt pretty cool getting the letter in, yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you continue, when a person continues down this road of self-governance, the process is intended to empower you. You become the sovereign of your own life.
Well,
That's a baggage drop, isn't it?
yeah, for me, I don't know, something that, you and Royce were a huge part of like getting me out to vote because I didn't know that I could vote anywhere else besides like the presidential election. So that was my issue was I didn't really understand how much power I had, but also I'm having like kind of like a self-testament right now. I'm having this weird moment because so much of my brain wants to believe that someone else is doing it or fixing it, whatever that it is. But now I'm starting to take a lead on my life. And it's so weird. And it feels like a culture shock of like, I'm a young man now. I need to lead my path. I need to lead my family. I can't be hoping on other people for answers. So,
If you're waiting for other people to give you answers, as we're going to talk about in tonight's episode, they do have a plan for you.
yeah.
Okay? There is a plan for every one of us. Okay? But I have a plan for myself so they can stick their plan right up their ass. Many plans arise in the hearts of man, but the plan in the heart of God always prevails. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the light and the dark. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating me in your image. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me an American. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me free. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for healing the blind. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for feeding the people. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for releasing the bound. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for raising up the downtrodden. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the heavens and earth. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for providing for all my needs. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for directing my path. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for our American courage. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for crowning America with glory. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for restoring strength to the weary. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for sending the Messiah that I might be saved. Forgive me, my Father, for I have sinned. Pardon me, my King, for I have willfully transgressed, for you pardon and forgive. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds, who is gracious and ever willing to forgive. This reminds me, blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for directing my path. There's people in my life that tell me I've done this wrong and I've done that wrong. And boy, I've sinned with great vigor, but everything makes me who I am. And if God is the master of all things, this is kind of this free will and determinism thing, but if God has a plan, and I know God is everywhere in the light and in the dark because I've been in both places, I just can't say I made any mistakes, really. I mean, I can say, please forgive me for what the sins that I've done in my addiction to sin. But when this thing's happened and that thing's happened, and it seems to be that I've gone awry, or I'm struggling with this, or I'm struggling with that, it's made me who I am so I can do this. So, yeah, I guess if I wasn't doing this, my life would be rather weird. I'd be kind of weird because I'd have all these weird experiences, but no payback, no give back. No, I mean, I would just be sitting here with the 2 bags that I was carrying around with me every place I would go, my baggage, because I never dropped my baggage. But I dropped my baggage and gave over to this process. Everything makes sense. Isn't that crazy? I remember I used to have a mathematical equation in my brain when I was younger. How everything was going to balance out, like an algebra equation. This happened, therefore that happened. And then one day I realized it wasn't balancing out. I was very disturbed by this because I have a mathematical mind. And then, I said, can't think about this anymore because this equation is not going to work. I forgot about it, suffered. One day I woke up, dropped my bags, and the equation balanced. Isn't that weird? That's weird, right? That's republicanism. That's what we're doing here. That's why we want people to love their Lord and to love their country and to love their neighbors and to love their neighbor as they want to be loved. Well, when that doesn't happen, we get the news that matters because there's no profit in loving your neighbor and being loved back by your neighbor. That love and peace, not a very profitable business. You know what's a really good business? We keep talking about it. Disease and war. So that's the news that matters because that sells soap, right? Tanner, can you play up here number 1? Just up to about 35, 36 seconds. Scenes of the war in northern Israel. Scenes. Damage, rockets, anti-rocket ballistic missiles. There you go. So what do you got there? You got wars and rumors of war. And Mrs. Professor Penn says there's no war because until she sees those rockets over Minnetonka, there's no war. Myself personally, I know that those are the B-team rockets. They don't go very far. But they got A-team rockets. They can launch them almost everywhere, and they could be right over Minnesota. I know that. So when I see those kind of scenes, I go, wow, we're at war. They're not throwing rocks at each other. If these 2 groups, the Palestinians and the Jews, were hurling rocks at each other, I wouldn't be too concerned. It'd be a world away. But actually, that's right around the corner for us. That's an American-supplied technology, American armaments deployed against Iranian armaments wielded by Hezbollah in northern Israel, Israeli Defense Forces and Hezbollah. That exchange was one of the biggest exchanges in many months. And as a matter of fact, Israel claimed, I'm not there, I don't know, that they anticipated a large rocket attack. So they just took off and preemptively launched 100 airplanes and bombed the living piss out of southern Lebanon. And that attack was the leftovers, was about 200 to 300 rockets that Hezbollah, which is basically Iran, it's an Iranian proxy, fired into Israel. And everybody gets all shook up because the big regional war could be starting tomorrow. However, what's really happening is a lot of ordnance getting used up and a lot of money's getting spent rearming constantly. That's what's going on. In fact, the U.S., that'd be you and me, us, we are rushing weapons shipments to Israel at an all-time pace. We're just continuously rearming these people. So, somebody's getting paid on this deal. This is great. It's like a great week in the tire business. A great week in the tire business. I look at my daily reports. We're selling tires to beat hell. Wow, we got to buy more tires. This is great. If I was in the weapons business and I saw this, I'd say, this is fantastic. It's not getting out of control. We don't have to worry about things spiraling into worldwide death. It's just good for business. And there's a few people that get killed along the way. Undesirables. Undesirables. Like we saw in the last podcast, they rounded up all European Jewry. They were undesirables. Just clip them out. Makes life easier, right? Solving a problem. Cultural genocide. Just make a problem go away, right? And get paid for it.
Or the other way around, where it could be an investment because they know the eye for an eye thing, and they know that if you poke a bear enough, it'll attack. So if they're just like, let's invest in it.
You could get all the people you wanted to clip each other out. This is like that movie. We're going to have to play this movie again. The Sum of All Fears. And Dressler, the Nazi character, said Hitler was crazy. He wasn't crazy. He was stupid, I think he said. He fought the Americans and the Russians at the same time. And he said as powerful as Germany was, that was too heavy of a lift. Why not have America and Russia fight each other? And then the Nazis can emerge victorious. That was the whole theme of the movie. You have so many movies to watch.
Yeah.
Just keep going out in nature and hunting. That's great. In the meantime, since the Israelis are being rearmed and they have the full support of the Democrat Party and the full support of the Republican Party, I'm talking about the parties, they got full support. They're ready to go. They actually raided into the West Bank. It was a very tense situation. Hundreds and hundreds of Israeli troops went into the West Bank, not Gaza, the West Bank. It was an area with some 80,000 Palestinians. And they are proceeding now to follow up with the same kind of activities in the West Bank that they have now perfected into Gaza. Iran is working to establish a terror front against Israel in the West Bank, according to the model it used in Lebanon and Gaza, by funding and arming terrorists and smuggling advanced weapons in from Jordan. So said one of the top ministers in Israel, Katz. So what they're establishing here is that it's the same thing, and they got to just keep moving along here. And this is a war the Israelis would like to win. And what does winning mean? It means the Palestinians are going to disappear. That's how they're going to disappear. And you're going to like this one, Tanner. We got this big war in the Gaza, right? They're up to over 40,000 Palestinian casualties, deaths so far. That is the generally accepted number. It's over 40,000 deaths. But they've suspended this killing. They've suspended it. There's a truce. You want to know why there's a truce? Isn't this important? Back to our theme of an underground transmission. We have to communicate with each other. Got to use our thinking. I'm going to read this just the way it was written down. I have to say, this is quite entertaining. The World Health Organization said that Israel has agreed to limited pauses in its bombardment of Gaza in certain areas to allow for the vaccination of children for polio, which has returned to the Strip due to the Israeli siege. You'll like this guy. The guy in charge of this operation, here's his name. He works for the World Health Organization. What an esteemed gentleman. His name is Rick, spelled R-I-K, not R-I-C-K. Rick Peppercorn. That's the man's name. Ah, man. Okay, Rick Peppercorn who's representative for the West Bank and Gaza, said the vaccinations would start in central Gaza this past Sunday, where, according to the agreement, there will be a 3-day pause in Israeli military attacks. Peppercorn said the goal is to vaccinate 640,000 children under the age of 10 so that they don't get polio, but the next day they will be under bombardment. That's so liberal.
It's just a money
Wonderful.
game.
No, it's just wonderful. Quiet now. We're talking about the needful vaccination of children in a war zone by the World Health Organization. I think this kind of an act stands on its own. I think everybody needs to draw their own conclusions about this humanitarian effort to vaccinate 640,000 children who, after the vaccinations are received, will be under bombardment. I think that is so humane. Just a comment. In the meantime, please play number 2.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Beyond World is One. My name is Mohammed Saleh, and let's start this broadcast by taking a quick look as to what is making headlines at this hour. Yemen's Houthi rebels have reportedly targeted a Greek-flagged Sonian oil tanker. 3 projectiles reportedly hit a merchant vessel off Yemen's rebel-held port city of Hodeidah on the 21st of August, causing a fire on board.
That's good, Tanner. Thank you. That's a very successful attack. The Houthis have managed to, or as Royce likes to call them, Houthi and the Blowfish, the Houthis, armed again by the Iranians, just like Hezbollah, just like Hamas. And Minister Katz of the Israeli government says they got a similar group now on the West Bank. There's Iranian proxies everywhere. And that's a very successful attack. Right off Hodeidah, which is their port there in Yemen, they hit that boat. That thing went up like a firecracker, didn't it? Wow. You know, the interruption of shipping through the Suez Canal, which is what this represents, is very expensive. If you looked at the inflation numbers from July, which you probably didn't, they spiked because everything in it is costing a lot more money. You know, we're dependent on imports, right? Very expensive now because the Suez Canal, one of the most important maritime choke points on Earth, has been choked off. Choked off. Can't get any boats through there. Isn't that strange that a bunch of rebels named the Houthis are able to defeat Operation Prosperity Guardian? Our U.S. Navy is there in the region, and they can't stop these people or won't stop these people from blowing up oil tankers. And that oil tanker, you know, I'm just going to tell you, for the environmentalists your age, right, that are supporting whatever they're supporting. You know, there's war everywhere, right? The most destructive activity for the environment is war, right? Uranium-depleted shells everywhere, blowing shit, killing people. War is quite unhealthy. Would you agree with me?
Yeah.
Right? That's the point of war.
Every aspect.
The point of war is it's unhealthy. We can't settle this the old-fashioned way, talking about it in a Republican fashion, so let's kill each other. You know, that boat that they hit there, that oil spill, the biggest boat oil spill was called the Exxon Valdez. It screwed up Alaska for a long time. It was a big cleanup effort. This boat, I think, has 4 or 5 times as much oil on it as Exxon Valdez. So this boat that they blow up right off their own shore, I was thinking about this, the Houthis, probably there's a lot of local Yemenis that make their living fishing off the coast of Yemen. Oh, the fishing's over because they've now destroyed their own environment. Isn't that interesting? But they were very proud of this, I'm sure. Looked great, didn't it? But all the oil that's going to come off that boat is going right to the shores of Yemen, and it's going to screw up the fisheries in that region. Isn't that interesting? They pulled in fire on their own position. Very successful. Very successful.
That's 150 tons of crude oil.
150,000 tons.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I didn't even say 1,000.
It's 150,000 tons
that's
of crude.
so much.
Right. It's 4 or 5 times the Exxon Valdez. Maybe we'll play a little Exxon Valdez the next show because, that was a big deal. This is 4 or 5 times bigger. And who's going to go clean it up in the area? There's no way to clean. We're not going to get an army of environmentalists out into this area to clean this up. If they are, we really want them knocking on doors. That'd be the fastest way to clean it up. You want to clean it. You care about the environment. You care about people. You go knock on doors. You walk your neighborhood. That's what I'm doing every day, walking my neighborhood, talking to my neighbors, making I statements. Because when I talk to a leftist and they start giving me crap because the environment, and I go, do you support the war? Yes. Do you know about this tanker that just got blown up in the Red Sea? Do you know that the policies of the U.S. government supporting these wars, I think this environmental disaster is 4 or 5 times that of the Exxon Valdez. I'm wondering, does anybody remember the Exxon Valdez? Do you remember the Exxon Valdez? Of course not. No, down the memory hole it goes. And, this is a clear sign that our military cannot protect the shipping through the Red Sea or will not protect it. Maybe they just want the price up. Who knows?
There's just so much oil. I can't. That's such a good point to bring up. All that oil just sitting in that water now. Yeah.
With no way to clean it up.
Fishing's done.
That's correct. Fishing's all done. That is exactly correct. So there's economic news that I was going to talk about, but I'm going to leave that for Thursday. God willing, we'll be here. Going to pass that up. We're going to pass up these downturns and these bad economic because it's a holiday. Let's eat our hot dogs and hamburgers in peace today, right? And have a good day. And let's go back in time because remember we talked about William the Refrigerator Perry on the last podcast?
Yes.
I thought just for fun, since it's a holiday, we would go back to what I think is probably the best decade in human history, the 1980s. Why do I say that? Well, Nixon had just recently financialized our economy. Reagan was the president. He had just recently turned us into a global hegemon. We were living in the glow of the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. We still didn't know what it meant. I was in my 20s. We're going to play something from about 1985. And when I was in that age, guess what I did? Every Sunday, I watched football from 12 till 6. Every Sunday. I never missed the football game. I was still in my mid-20s. I was still hanging around with football players. We were training together. I was, not capable of playing professional sports, not even close, but I was capable of training with these people, and I did. So I had a great interest in it. I hung out with the hockey players, hung out with football players, and we had the Refrigerator Perry. And you're going to get to see this guy know the whole story. And we're doing this because it's a holiday. We just want to take a few minutes of enjoyment. Please play number 3.
Let's go back to that 1984 NFC Championship for a moment. Bill Walsh's 49ers were handing it to what was to become one of the most dominant defenses of all time. Pre-Super Bowl shuffle, Mike Ditka's Bears. In the third quarter, Walsh had his guard, Guy McIntyre, line up in the backfield to pave the way for this Wendell Tyler touchdown run.
Barrels into the end zone, 49er touchdown.
With the game no longer in doubt, Walsh was still using McIntyre in the backfield, and Bears defensive players were not happy. That just wasn't normal protocol in those days. Walter Payton, who had to play quarterback that day because of injuries, wasn't thrilled about it either. And Mike Ditka ticked off. This is where it gets good. Fast forward to October 1985. The Bears were 5-0 in the talk of pro football. On their schedule, the defending champion 49ers at Candlestick Park, the site of that championship game blowout. This time, Chicago was taking it to the 49ers.
And it's Walter Payton gets a hold. Payton may go all the way. Touchdown!
Up 26-10 late in the fourth quarter, it was payback time. So into the game trots rookie defensive tackle William the Refrigerator Perry. All 335 pounds of him to play offense. Except unlike Walsh, Ditka's plan wasn't to have Perry block.
And a handoff to William Perry, playing in the backfield with a minute to go. William the Refrigerator Perry carried the ball.
I think that might be a message to the Angus formation from last year in the NFC Championship game.
Ditka clearly admired his own work, because the following Monday night, he went big.
And here he comes. Uh-oh. Listen to the crowd. They're giving the football to Perry. Touchdown. William Perry spikes the football. And this crowd loves it. They will write songs about William Perry.
An overnight sensation was born. The Fridge was the heaviest player in NFL history to score a rushing touchdown. Before you knew it, he was the heaviest celebrity around.
The Refrigerator.
He had his own fan club, and not long after, his own song. Everyone was in love with the cuddly nose tackle. Ditka and his staff weren't done, though. 2 weeks later, against the same Packers that got run over in the end zone, Perry got really involved in the offense.
Perry in motion. The pass to Perry. Touchdown. Unbelievable. He goes in motion. They figured he's going to turn up for a block. He just takes off and completely fooled the Green Bay Packers. And the key to William Perry was hang on to that ball.
What people were missing was that Fridge was a good athlete. In fact, Chicago surged to 12-0 when Perry put that athleticism on display against the poor Falcons.
Touchdown. Well, he got that new move. You know, he used to just run in there. Now he has this deal where he's going to dive. Boom, boom, boom. Whap. Both, he just goes right up over.
The 85 Bears would shuffle their way to Super Bowl 20, shutting out both the Giants and Rams on their way. The Fridge did record a sack in the NFC Championship. But let's get real. At this point, all fans wanted to see was the big man carrying the rock on sports' biggest stage. So, of course, Ditka obliged.
Perry. That one registered 3.8. Another Super Bowl record, the first Refrigerator to score.
The Bears completely dominated the Patriots, 46-10. Yet all anyone could talk about was that Perry, and not future Hall of Famer Walter Payton, scored in the Super Bowl. The real story here was that Perry would go on to be a reliable player for a decade in the NFL. He was one of the top run stuffers in the league his final season with the Philadelphia Eagles, starting every week at about 350 pounds. He retired after that season. In fact, Perry would never score again after that magical rookie year of 1985. Yet it was a season that no football fan will ever forget, because the Fridge and the Bears made football fun. And don't think for a second that his influence doesn't linger.
Mallett throws left side of the end zone. Watch J.J. Watt. Touchdown!
Bootleg Derek Carr, who lob it for a touchdown, caught by Donald Penn.
In Chiefs history, there has never been a 350-pound wide receiver for a touchdown.
Boy, was it cool to be in my mid-20s. I was your age when this was going on. And I'm going to tell you what it was like, Mr. Tanner. We were so sure of ourselves, we felt unimpeachable. There was nothing could go wrong. Whatever America did worked out. There was money everywhere, jobs everywhere. Everybody was super optimistic. We were large and in charge. We thought we were the greatest thing, and we didn't even talk about it. We just saw it in the football. The most pressing thing on everybody's mind during football season was the football season. That's what really messed us up. What were the Vikings going to do? Were the Vikings going to win or lose? What was going to happen? That was the most important thing to me. It was so easy to make money. The country was growing. The grocery shelves were full. You could go get a car, could get a house, you could get a woman, whatever you wanted to do. We were still living in a traditional culture close to the first turning. We didn't realize that all over the world, there was business conferences that were setting up the future agenda that we're living in today. We didn't know it. We were dumb. We didn't know. If you talk about the history of human knowledge, the history of faith in creating secret societies goes back thousands of years. Thousands. But the aggregation of scientific knowledge, sociological knowledge, anthropological knowledge, knowledge of the economy, this is like only 400 years. There was no knowledge of this stuff before. We've created this giant industry called the university education complex that goes all the way down to kindergarten that has now aggregated our knowledge, codified it, organized it, turned it into knowledge, facts into knowledge and into wisdom. And all over the world, these universities are putting out people who become academics, and that's what we're going to talk about now. That's what we're going to talk about, because this is the pith of tonight's podcast. I tried to play some fun stuff, be in an upbeat mood. It's a holiday weekend, right? Oh, we're going to get into it now. So put aside the fun and games, and we're going to get into some stuff that, again, I want you to, I'm asking everyone to use their creative mind, and we're going to talk about the Wannsee Conference. The Wannsee Conference was a meeting of senior officials in Nazi Germany held in the Berlin suburb of Wannsee on the 20th of January, 1942. The leaders got together. They weren't the top leaders, okay? The top leaders, that was Adolf Hitler and Hermann Göring and Himmler. They were the top bosses, right? No, these were the guys right underneath. These were the neck that turned the head. These were the dudes that make things happen. And you know what they were going to make happen at this conference? The liquidation of the Jewish population of Europe, what they called, the final solution to the Jewish question. And they actually had a business meeting, and they chopped up how this was going to go on. And this has been documented. And we're going to talk about this because, these kind of conferences are going on all the time. These kind of conferences go on all the time. Listen to this. Legalized discrimination against Jews in Germany began immediately after the Nazi seizure of power in January 1933. This is critical. Please listen. This is in Wikipedia. The ideology of Nazism brought together elements of anti-Semitism, racial hygiene, and eugenics, and combined them with pan-Germanism and territorial expansionism with the goal of obtaining more Lebensraum, living space for the German people. The ideology of Nazism, like the ideology of republicanism. These two are on opposite sides of the football. The ideology of Nazism centralized power. It was a leftist movement. They still call it rightist to this day because it was to the right of the communists, but it's a leftist movement that aggregated power, authoritarian control, and the ideology of Nazism brought together, listen now, elements of anti-Semitism, racial hygiene, and eugenics. Eugenics would be improving the human genome by the elimination of humans that have suboptimal traits. Suboptimal. In this case, it was the Jews. I'm going to say this again. The aggregation of facts in the knowledge and to create it into a wisdom, that's not religious. That's not spiritual. That's based on science. We're talking about 400 years now. Not very long. It takes time to kind of look at how things work. Like the first time something happens, you go, oh, look at that event. I need to study that. And then somebody writes about it, studies about it, thinks about it, creates a PhD, and they explain how the thing happened. And if they're really good at it, really smart, they get a Nobel Prize because it's so scientifically relevant. But you know why they study that? It's not just to figure out how it happened the first time. It's how to reproduce it the next time on purpose. It's about how to make things happen using the experience of how things happened in the past. That's the aggregation of fact. Like, here's a fact. Okay, how did it work? That's knowledge. Oh, let's apply it systematically. That's wisdom. But it could be negative wisdom. We have this thing about wisdom. When we hear the word wisdom, we think, oh, it's for the good. Well, one man's wisdom for the good is another person's wisdom for the bad. It depends what street corner you're on. And these people at this Wannsee conference, well, let's just see what they did. Could you please play number 4?
Hello and welcome to History Pod. On the 20th of January 1942, a number of senior Nazis met at the Wannsee Conference, where they discussed what was referred to as the final solution to the Jewish question. SS Obergruppenführer Reinhard Heydrich had called the meeting, in which he outlined the deportation of European Jews to extermination camps in Poland, where they would be systematically murdered. 6 months earlier, on the 31st of July 1941, Hermann Goering had ordered Heydrich to submit plans for the implementation of the projected final solution of the Jewish question. Heydrich was a trusted member of the Nazi elite and had been referred to by Hitler as the man with the iron heart. He had helped to organize Kristallnacht, establish Jewish ghettos in Nazi-controlled territories, and commanded the Einsatzgruppen prior to his planning of the final solution. Heydrich intended the Wannsee Conference to take place on the 9th of December 1941, but it was postponed due to the USSR's counteroffensive in the Battle of Moscow and the entry of the USA into the war. 15 representatives from a variety of government ministries attended the delayed meeting on the 20th of January. By this time, hundreds of thousands of Jews had been killed in the East, and the planning and construction of extermination camps had already begun. The meeting therefore focused on coordination between the various government agencies who were to implement the deportations. Minutes from the meeting survive as what is known as the Wannsee Protocol, although the language was edited so that mass extermination was never explicitly recorded.
So my point here, and those, I recognize when people watch this, they think I'm talking about the Jews, and I am to the extent that this actually happened. It's a fact, a historical fact. But the fact that a group of senior business, government, and military people could meet and plot the extermination of a population and then implement it. Well, we talked about in the last podcast, the way they did it, it was pretty expensive. I'm not really talking here about the Jews, except beyond just to note this as a historical fact, because this was organized. This was the first time it had ever been done. This Wannsee Conference was the first time a group of people had gotten together and plotted out a plan of eugenics. Eugenics. Look it up, EUGENIC. Eugenics as a systematic, industrialized strategy of racial hygiene. It never happened before. It never been done before. That's why it's such a notable event. It never been planned out, systematized, and industrialized at this kind of a level. There's been cultural genocides going back to the way back. But as far as this kind of broad-based, continent-wide destruction of a people, these guys were path setters. These were the people that brought order to chaos. They said, hey, there's lots of people killing lots of people. Let's organize this. But they had it backwards. They missed something. But these were the people that aggregated some facts into knowledge. And just because someplace, somewhere, a group just like this is meeting today, a combination of people that are in secret societies, business leaders, government officials. Somewhere today there's a group like this meeting. Let's just mention their names just for fun. SS Obergruppenführer Reinhard Heydrich, SS Gruppenführer Otto Hoffmann, SS Gruppenführer Heinrich Müller, SS Oberführer Karl Eberhard Schongart, SS Oberführer Gerhard Klopfer, SS Obersturmbannführer Adolf Eichmann, SS Sturmbannführer Rudolf Long, George Liebrandt, Alfred Mayer, These are the government people, right? They don't have military titles. Joseph Buehler, Roland Freisler, SS Brigadeführer Wilhelm Stuckert, SS Oberfuhrer Erich Neumann, Frederick William Kritzinger, and Martin Luther. These people got together and they made a plan. Actually, they didn't really make a plan. This was actually Heydrich, who's a fantastic villain. He's kind of the Prigozhin of his day. He was actually asserting control over the mechanisms of the German government and German military to make for the efficient and effective liquidation of this population. And this kind of a thing was taught to me as being an aberration. Never again. It's never going to happen again. Yet we saw in the last podcast that killing people with malnutrition could be starving them. It could make them chronically diseased. What's the improvement of that? If you get people chronically diseased, you can monetize their deaths. That's really a step up. These people organized a continent-wide effort to liquidate a population, and it cost them a lot of money. It was a negative. This same ideology of Darwinism, of eugenics, and we're going to play a piece out of a movie called Conspiracy. It's a 3-minute and 18-second piece. Again, this is not about the Jews. This is about organizing an effort to do something at a cultural level, because we're taught as citizens that such things do not occur, yet they obviously occur. And when we take our blinders off and we see what's occurring around us, going back all the way back into the 60s and 70s and 80s when I was young, because this stuff happened organically at first and then it was organized. Who gets really rich? Not the inventor. It's the person that organizes the invention. Bill Gates didn't come up with writing software. He organized the writing of software, right? You agree with that statement? That's correct. Why don't you play number 5? Please play number 5.
Dr. Kritzinger, can we come to a further understanding here? What can we all agree on? What I would like agreed here is that mixed blood persons of the first degree, they have 2 Jewish grandparents, they are half Jews, they are just Jews. They go. Their children go. Now, there are in the law as of now 2 exceptions, if you would...
For first-degree mixed, if they're married to Germans and they have children...
Could you stop it for
exempted.
a second? Guess what they're arguing about here? Now, this is a depiction. It's a dramatic depiction. I don't believe that this meeting was anything like this, because you're going to see conflict and, these people that went to the Wannsee conference, they were all 100% in on this deal. They were just chopping up the responsibilities, right? Nobody was and you're going to see this get resolved. But here's what they're talking about right now. Are you ready? You ready for this? Who is a German citizen? Isn't that an important issue here in the United States right now? Who's an American citizen? They're talking about killing people. They're stripping people's citizenship, and they're going to kill them. Here we're talking about giving citizenship to people that weren't born here. It's the same thing, just a little different. Could you please continue?
The children would be second-degree mixed, who would be treated as Germans. The other exception is for first-degree mixed, who the Reich has already chosen to honor with special privilege for whatever reason.
We are talking here of men and women who live as Germans. They do not worship as Jews, they do not behave as Jews, but have some quantity of blood.
The genetic Jew.
And in those cases, we are going to re-examine each individual determination and perhaps revoke their exemption.
Well, the Nuremberg laws
and whoever receives exemption better damn well have some extraordinary merits personally, not just by the merits of a German parent or husband or wife. And those who are exempt from evacuation, they too will fall within certain categories.
Could you, General... Sorry. I have the real feeling I evacuated 30,000 Jews already by shooting them at Riga. Is what I did evacuation? When they fell, were they evacuated? There are another 20,000 at least waiting for similar evacuation. I just think it is helpful to know what words mean.
With all respect.
If I might, I think it's unnecessary to burden the record.
Yes. In my personal opinion, they are evacuated.
Explain.
I have just done so.
That is not, no, that is contrary to what the Chancellery has been told. I have directly been assured, that purge the Jews, yes. But to annihilate them, that we have undertaken to systematically annihilate all the Jews of Europe, that possibility has personally been denied to me by the Führer.
And it will continue to be.
Yes, I understand. Yes. He will continue to deny it.
My apologies. Do you accept my apologies?
Of course.
Heydrich was a particularly villainous figure, and he was respected for his ruthlessness, and that was Kenneth Branagh playing the part of Heydrich. And the point of this scene was the control that the SS took of this whole process, taking government ministries and military units and deploying them in this process of eugenics. You know, we say it was the destruction of European Jewry. It was eugenics. It was Darwinism. 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 They decided that Jews were a subhuman species and needed to be clipped out for the good of mankind. Racial hygiene. They had an idea about it. That's great. Just great. That was their idea. And Heydrich was there to enforce discipline in the process so it'd be efficient and effective. And you saw that government minister walk away. He goes, wow, I don't really believe this happened at the meeting, but it's drama. It's showing the drama of this man coming to grips with he's participating in the murder of millions of people. And he looked at the room and he said, whoa, I got to make a choice here. If I'm not in on this deal, I'm going to lose my job and maybe my life. And he didn't have the courage. He had the courage to pound the table when the officer was saying, is evacuation and extermination the same thing? You know, he clapped with his hand on the table. But when put to the test, and Heydrich said, do you accept my apologies? He said, as a matter of fact, I do. Because he wanted to keep his job in show business. He wanted to keep his life. That's tyranny. That's an authoritarian, tyrannical system which is no longer protecting the sovereign rights of the individual. The sovereignty of the individual has been subsumed into the importance of the Volk, the people, the state. This is leftism. It's got nothing to do with republicanism. This is anti-republicanism. And my point in playing this is, well, okay, so the Nazis were defeated. They were defeated. And we thought, growing up in the 60s, that this could never happen again. In fact, my father dedicated his academic life to making sure that this never happened again. Spent his whole life working on it. What happened? He just died in 2019. I woke up, whoa. There's meetings going on. We're going to even talk about some of the groups that started this. Let's talk about a book that came out. I remember it sitting on my mother's table like it was yesterday. I remember the man's name. Are you familiar with a book called The Population Bomb?
I have not.
And the Stanford researcher, Dr. Paul Ehrlich. Never heard of this before. Well, let's look at how this worked out, because this came up merely 20 years after the end of World War II. Please play number 6.
Now,
given the population explosion, let alone in this country, what can the government, what ought the government to do about this?
Well, what it ought to do is this. The first thing, you don't want to put, I'm against government interference in our lives. You want to minimize that. So the very first thing the government should do is try and take the pressure off to reproduce. There's a lot of pressure in our society now to reproduce. If you're single, people try and push you into getting married. You know, your wife, you have a bachelor over and your wife says, gee, shouldn't I have a nice girl over? The idea is, you know, nobody should escape. So there's pressure to get married. Young couples, if they don't have children, people say, gee, they must be sterile. They never say, gee, maybe they like good wine and going to the theater and so on. They prefer that to scraping diapers. So there's pressure to have children. So the first thing that should happen is that the president ought to say, from now, here on out, no intelligent, patriotic American family ought to have more than 2 children, preferably 1, if you're starting a family now. Not any law, but just say this is what responsible people do. He ought to make the FCC see to it that large families are always treated in a negative light on television wherever they appear. There ought to be a tremendous amount of television time devoted to spot commercials, the sort we've had against smoking. But the ones in the middle, say in the middle of Beverly Hillbillies, you get a scene which shows Los Angeles in the smog, and it just says this city has a fatal disease. It's called overpopulation, and so long. Now, that sort of campaign, you could have a census, a sample census, which would see whether that was having the desired effect. If that didn't, you could move to giving women bonuses for not having babies. That almost certainly would do the job. If that didn't have the effect, then you could move to changing the tax structure so that people who had the money and had the children paid for the children. In other words, you would increase taxes on people with children rather than decrease them, since when they have the children, they require more services. If that doesn't work, then you'll have the government legislating the size of the family. And people say, oh, that's impossible. Government can never intrude and tell you how many children to have. Well, I got news. You know, it intruded a long time ago and told you how many wives you can have. And there's not the slightest question that if we don't get the population under control with voluntary means, that in the not-too-distant future, the government will simply tell you how many children you can have and throw you in jail if you have too many.
That's Paul Ehrlich, scholar, PhD, professor at one of our most important academic institutions, that'd be Stanford University. And, you know, one might say, because they're not inside his head, maybe you believe this, but what is he really advocating for? He's saying there's a population bomb, that the population's going to destroy everything, that we have to limit the population. The government needs to intervene progressively. Just like Herman Kahn said, we got to create a security state to control the population, which came out at roughly the same kind of time, just after World War II. Like, I thought this Nazi ideology, which was really, that was what they called it. It was Darwinism and eugenics. It was the belief in man and woman, like Margaret Sanger, that we as humankind could actually practice a kind of racial hygiene and improve the stock of mankind through selective breeding, which would be the positive eugenics, or genocide, which would be the negative eugenics. And what was this guy selling? He was selling depopulation. Now, let's just think about that. Depopulation. When the Nazis took over in Germany in 1933, they started to economically and physically harass the Jewish population. Most of the Jews left voluntarily. They gave up. They said, we're getting out of here. Well, the getting is good, right? In Germany. The other places, not so much. Well, he's saying, hey, first we're going to start to disincentivize men and women from having children. How would we do that? We'd replace sex. We'd put sex, we'd replace love. We'd put sex where love is supposed to be. That'd be a starting point, right? We'd convince people that having children is not in their best interests. We'd break down the family. We'd make families dependent on government. We would do all kinds of social programs which could lead to depopulation. But what does depopulation mean? Isn't that kind of like evacuation in the Wannsee Conference? You know, wouldn't somebody stand up at the meeting and go, Professor Ehrlich, when you're talking about a population bomb and the need to depopulate, does that mean evacuation and depopulation? Does that mean the same thing? And the guy's going, see, we're just waking up from this thing. I'm saying this is why I'm door knocking. You know, if you think I'm door knocking because I want to elect a particular candidate, That would be very not accurate. I'm door knocking because regardless of where Paul Ehrlich was coming from and his wife when they wrote this book in the 60s, it's about this thick too. It was a big book. And it really had a profound influence on the people that read it. Generations of academics that spawned government officials and business leaders that believe, like Malthus, that population is going to increase faster than resource can keep up with it. It's going to lead to a bomb, a big problem. Well, then we're doing the right thing. So if we have to cut the population, who are we going to cut? Who's not making the cut? Who's not going to reproduce? Who's making those decisions? Well, maybe in World War II it was very targeted. Let's get those people. They didn't get all of them. Now everybody's sitting up there in the High Council at the Martin-Wannsee Conference. Who's going to get clipped out so that humanity can proceed? And now we have artificial intelligence and robotics. We don't need nearly the same number of people that we did previously. We don't need people at all. In fact, if you're talking about depopulating an overpopulation problem, you're kind of saying, hey, humans are the problem. Oh, wait a second. Aren't humans causing global climate change? Isn't that a related issue? I mean, for your generation, aren't human choices the reason the planet's getting screwed up environmentally?
Yeah.
Wow. That's another reason to clip these people out. They're wrecking it for everybody. Who's going to get clipped out? That's the question. See, at the Wannsee Conference, they knew who they were going to clip out. They had a targeted population, and they invested state resources in achieving their goals. They got the job done. But now we got the whole planet is under threat from humanity itself. Wow. I wonder what they're talking about in those conferences. Those people. I mean, if they had a Wannsee conference that organized this thing in World War II, isn't there a conference now that took Paul Ehrlich's idea and organized it for the good of everybody? For the good of everybody. Hey, for the good of everybody, for the good of everybody, I'm going to have nothing and I'm going to be happy about it. Right? Where did these ideas come from? What are the organizations? Who's involved in this? What does it mean? Where does it come from? Well, you know, the 1960s was an interesting period in the 70s and 80s. The first turning, 1945 to 1965, things were pretty sincere. And then we had this great civil rights movement and anti-war movement. And for the first time, we started to get a lot of leftists into the universities, and they brought with them their leftism. And there was an argument in the left is it an overpopulation problem or is it a allocation of resource problem? There was a big argument over this book. Leftists argued over this. But what prevailed was science. What prevailed was science because science is essentially a technique of the left. Faith is a technique of the right. Right? Right. We don't walk by faith and not by sight. That's not really over on the other side of the football. They think people that believe in God are suboptimal. They're throwing sand in the gears, as Herman Kahn used to say. So what they were talking about with the Black Panthers in that Hudson Institute piece we always play, that was a beta test. Who's the problem now? Who's throwing sand in the gears now today? I'm not going to say. I'm going to ask you to think about it. Where did these ideas come from? Well, it came from many places. We had secret societies, like we're not going to list them, but we have many of our leaders. We just saw a podcast where Tim Russert asked two presidential candidates about a secret society. We have to say, what goes on in secret societies? I bet most people think in secret societies, there's lots of drinking and pot smoking and girl chasing. That's what we're led to believe. It's a secret society. It's just for fun, right? And that's not true. I was in a secret society, and there was very little fun there. There was a lot of training there. Rigorous training, intellectual training, emotional training, and physical training aimed at a goal. Aimed at a goal. They had a goal, the people I trained with. Well, there was a group founded in 1968 by Aurelio Pecci and Alexander King. It was called the Club of Rome. I'm sure you've never heard of it. It exists to this day. It's a secret society. And the Club of Rome was a group of intellectuals and business leaders. It was a nonprofit organization whose goal is a critical discussion of pressing global issues. The club was founded in 1968 at the Accademia dei Lincei in Rome. It has 100 full members selected from current and former heads of state and government, UN administrators, high-level politicians, government officials, diplomats, scientists, economists, and business leaders from around the globe. Isn't that interesting that there's a group just like the Wannsee Conference? They call it the Club of Rome. They get together regular. You know, on the in the James Bond series, they called it Spectre. Spectre. You know, they called it the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome, a secret society. And guess what they came up with? They came up to something called the limits to growth. The Club of Rome brought upon itself considerable publication when it issued its first report, The Limits to Growth. It was published in 1972. Its computer simulation suggested that economic growth could not continue indefinitely because of resource depletion. So there's a couple of different variables in this equation: how much resources you have and how many people you have consuming those resources. So guess what? If you want the resources to last longer, Tanner, what do? You cut the population. Oh, this sounds rather eugenicist, doesn't it? Who's not making the cut? Apparently, other humans that put their pants leg on, one at a time, decided that not everybody can make the cut. But I think they came up with a better idea. Just like in the Nazi era, where it cost all this money to do it, they said, oh, that was really racist. That's not inclusive. That's not inclusive. That's not right. We can't do it that way where we pick on one group. We got to kill everybody because that's fair.
So can I make a connection real quick? The way I like to think of it is if I was a farmer and I had cows, I would have to limit how much my cows are actually reproducing or how many cows I have in my pen dependent on how much feed I have. So it's not like an individual group except for the future generations. And if I can pull this up on the screen real quick, because I pulled it up, the population percentage going through it's pretty normal, but then once you get to Gen Alpha, and we're about to end that here soon, only 12.76, and that's around, I think I did the numbers, like 46 million, and that's a huge drop right after
Apparently
mine.
something's working. Apparently something's working. Something's working here. This is why I'm door knocking. Because I look at this chronic disease and I say, wow, that's a great business model. And I look at the population drop in that generation, which that's a great graphic. Why did it drop? And look how unwell these kids are going to be. I mean, come on, they're unwell. When Bobby Kennedy stands up and we have to verify the data that 77% of that generation is not qualified for military service because they're unwell. How do you even defend yourself as a country? Right? Wow.
I think, I don't know, my honest opinion, I don't think I'll see it in my lifetime, but I think America is setting themselves up for a population collapse. I don't think a population bomb is like what we need to be worried about, because when I see that, like, yeah, you said all the issues that our young have, what are they going to reproduce like? And are the numbers going to cut again? And
the native population is collapsing, but we're importing a lot of new people because we got to keep the machine working. We need consumers. I just heard a Democrat over the weekend, nay, I said it was Nancy Pelosi, talk about how important all these new immigrants are for our economy. Isn't that great? Because we're going to eat and buy and get sick and go to the hospital. It's all great. And then if there's a war, we got draftees. It's perfect.
And it's bringing people over that might not have a full scope and understanding. I mean, most Americans aren't even that good at this anyways. but bringing people from other countries, they don't know the beginning of American history.
We can't get Americans to self-govern.
Yeah.
How perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
We got to get out into the streets and be doing the door knocking and the calling and spreading republicanism. We can see how important it is. I'm painting a picture here, very kind of just we're having a conversation without saying everything. I'm not really saying the quiet part out loud because I want to stay here with you. Got to do a little bit of work here. If there was a Wannsee conference and a population was clipped out and it cost a lot of money, and they said, what did we do wrong? Well, we shouldn't have fought a two-front war. That was stupid. We should have had the Russians and Americans fight each other. It's happening. It's happening right now. Wow, we have to depopulate. We got to make racial hygiene. Who are these people? Are we not seeing a population collapse in that data you just showed? Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And the downstream implications of this idea, well, let's just play number 7, something from India, which Indians are getting a lot of anti-Indian racism right now. Listen to this and the people involved. Play number 7.
The infamous chapter of forced sterilization in India during the 1970s remains etched in the nation's history as a haunting reminder of a dark and dictatorial era. The roots of this drastic measure can be traced back to Paul Ehrlich's controversial book, The Population Bomb, which predicted dire consequences of overpopulation. Namaste, this is TFI Post, and I, Animesh Pandey, would delve into the connection between Ehrlich's theories, the role of international institutions, and the tragic events that unfolded in India during that period. Imagine the Indian administration acting verbatim on the policy of certified nutcases like Bernie Sanders and Greta Thunberg. That was precisely what the incumbent Congress administration did in the early 70s. Paul Ehrlich's predictions about global overpopulation, though proven wrong in many aspects, had far-reaching consequences. As his theories gained popularity, Ehrlich became an influential figure in environmental science and activism, accumulating awards and accolades alike. His misguided beliefs had a profound impact on India's family planning policies, leading to a gruesome and inhumane campaign. In 1968, Ehrlich's book triggered concerns about overpopulation and imminent starvation worldwide. His recommendations for forced sterilization were taken way too seriously, particularly by the then US President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Allegedly, Johnson conditioned financial assistance to India on the implementation of mass sterilization programs, which found support from the then India's leadership. During the emergency period in India, Sanjay Gandhi, the son of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, had launched a coercive and brutal sterilization campaign with financial backing from international organizations such as the World Bank, Swedish International Development Authority, and the UN Population Fund. The government treated its own citizens as mere statistics to achieve population control targets. The scale of forced sterilizations conducted during the emergency was staggering. Approximately 6.2 million Indian men were sterilized in just 1 year. The targets primarily focused on poor, uneducated men from underprivileged areas. In some instances, entire villages were cordoned off by the police and men were forcefully subjected to surgeries. Tragically, over 2,000 men lost their lives due to botched procedures. But who cares? As long as they got international validation. The involvement of institutions like the Ford and the Rockefeller Foundation raises questions about the complicity in endorsing and facilitating forced sterilizations. While these institutions may have justified their support as a means to address India's population problem, the ethical implications of such actions cannot be ignored. It highlights the double standards exhibited by nations that champion human rights and democracy today. The forced sterilization of millions of Indian men represents one of the most horrifying chapters in the country's modern history. It serves as a painful reminder of the disregard for human dignity, individual rights, and the abuse of power. The scars of this dark period continue to impact affected families and communities to this day. The forced sterilization campaign unleashed during India's emergency period stands as a tragic consequence of misguided ideology and the convergence of international influence. It serves as a stark reminder of the importance of safeguarding human rights, respecting individual autonomy, and being vigilant against policies that prioritize numbers over humanity. As we reflect on this dark chapter, it is imperative that we learn from history and ensure that such violations are never repeated.
Interesting, isn't it?
It's interesting.
Very interesting.
Well, I just want to say this real quick because I think about it. I remember in biology class when I learned about the circle of life and then the food chain and how if you mess with one population, it throws off all the other populations. So that's where I don't think this is the solution. I'm not saying that I like anything this has to do, but I also don't quite scratch that itch that it is kind of still an issue that populations could be growing way bigger than what the natural area is supposed to hold. So is it a thing that we intervene or we know that the earth has a way to deal with that? It'll eventually balance itself out again. So do we just let earth and mother nature do its thing? But that thing might be that mass starvation.
It could be a secret society, and you could take that comment you just made, and it's a giant lever to do whatever the hell you want to do. Because we have this belief, a set of judgments about how things are. And it's my belief that those judgments are lies. I want to stick with judge not lest you be judged, and he who is without sin casteth the first stone. I like to live my life like that. We have a bunch of judgments that have been brought to us mostly by British intellectuals and downstream in the American universities that they spawned. They have this idea about what reality is. Why is that reality? I'm living in their reality, the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. Perhaps if we knock doors and make phone calls and get our friends and neighbors to the polls on election day, late in the day, and we have a result that allows us to restore republicanism, perhaps a completely different set of data will emerge because there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. I've lived my life a certain way. I'm not going to talk about it right now, but I violate many of their alleged the way things are supposed to be. I don't agree. I do not agree. So I'd like to find out. But the first step to finding out is we have to throw off the yoke of the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, because we see that what it is bringing us is worldwide communism, eugenics. We just saw it brought us eugenics in India. Who was Lyndon B. Johnson? A Republican? No, he was a Democrat. He brought us the Great Society, the society where childhood obesity of people that are below the poverty line is over twice the rate of people that are 4 times the poverty line. Geez, I would think if the government was so good at this, those would be the healthiest people in the society because the government was taking care of them, right? No, they're the sickest people in the society. What are we doing here? What are we doing? We know, this audience knows. Please go repost these links in your socials. Please send me ideas. I'll respond. Hit the like button. Leave comments. Let's build the community. If you're in Minnesota and you're in the party, I urge you to contact me. Let's get together statewide and nationally an organization of people that are willing to do whatever it takes to throw off the yoke of a lie, damn lies and statistics, and try republicanism again, which worked really well for a very long time until a group of very wealthy people put a limit on freedom. Club of Rome being one of the downstream groups, secret societies that came up from that effort. That's what it is. It's a secret society, just like the WEF, populated with business people and scientists and government leaders coming up with plans like the Wannsee Conference. If they did it once, we know they can do it again. But because it's a holiday weekend, we're going to go out with something very uplifting to me. There's a guitar player. This dude is so badass. His name is Wah Wah Watson. He's old now. Wawa's but man, he was a pathfinder, a pace setter. He was playing in a band with a great jazz piano player named Herbie Hancock. This is a long jazz piece we're going to go out with, and I'm just going to enjoy it with you because the guitar playing is so fine. I hope you have a great week. I hope to see you again on Thursday. Let's contemplate what happens when power aggregates far from our neighborhoods and people who do not care about me make decisions that impact my life. I don't like it, and I'm door knocking to bring that BS to an end. Thank you very much. I'll see you soon again.
Have a good one, everybody.
I'd like to introduce you to a fantastic guitar player by the name of Wawa Watson. And on bass, the incredible Paul Jackson. And on drums, a newcomer to this band, fine drummer, James Levi. And on Lyricon, tenor saxophone, sax solo, soprano saxophone, the extraordinarily talented Benny Maupin.
Bye.